Good evening, everybody. This is an E39 M5 passenger seat, and I just got done fixing the infamous twist issue. As many of you know, when you push the seat forward or back, only half of it does its job. In order to fix that, you need to remove a couple of cables from underneath, and you need to shorten them slightly. That's the culprit right there, that black one. There's actually 4 of them. You have to take them out, remove the fitting from the end, shorten them, put the fitting back on, and put it all back together. It's a lot of fun, and we're gonna do it. Here's the car these lovely seats came out of. It's my 2003 M5. We're getting it ready for Crown Rally right now, so we just put KW coilovers into it. I'm liking that ride height. Quite a bit taken apart right now. The whole back seat is out because we had to access the upper strut mounts, which are in the parcel shelf. And I also bought a Dynavin head unit, which is awesome, by the way. I'm really happy with it. And we're in the middle of installing that. So I have the... Man, we can't see anything, can we? And we're back with some lights, so yeah. Take out that whole under panel so that I could run wiring. Yeah, that was not the fun part. But I figured I'd show you guys a couple of things while we're at it when it comes to removing the seat. So you can see there are 4 holes in the floor. Each of those has a bolt that holds the seat in place. This is the plug for the seat, and this is the adjustment for the seat belt height. Check that out. So when you move the seat front and back, it actually adjusts that automatically. Pretty cool. So you need to remove this from the bottom of the seat before it comes out. And you have to remove the plug, of course. You also have to remove the seat belt. This actually goes down in a slot on top of the seat and bolts through from this side onto the frame of the seat. So what you want to do is slide the seat all the way back and undo the forward 2 bolts. Then you slide the seat all the way forward, undo the rear 2 bolts. Then you can tilt the seat up. You're going to unbolt that. You're going to unclip this. And you're going to put the seat back down, and then you want to run it back and lower it all the way. And then unplug it. At that point, you can just lift it up and pull it out the side facing forward. I like to put a moving blanket over the door panel and over the rocker just to protect things. Always a nice step. You can try to be careful, but you never know. Definitely have scratched a couple cars when you think you can do it on your own, and yeah, it's really better to be safe than sorry. So that's the inside process, and that's the car. And next I'll show you the tools we used. All right, here are some of the tools we're going to use for the repair. Pretty decent assortment of them that'll help with various things. A couple things that you might find work better for you in your toolbox versus what I had handy. To start off with, something to release the springs on the seat base. This came in handy just because I was able to get that shaft underneath the hook on the end of the spring and then leverage against the seat base. Help to release it. The pick is nice to release the cable from the bottom of the seat. Ratchets, various sizes and extensions. It's a T30 size is what we'll be using on the bolts on the seat base. The extensions help access to some of them. This one in particular was nice on my driver's seat because I actually wasn't able to operate it because of the seat twist. So that allowed me to get into a position I wasn't able to otherwise. The ratcheting 8mm wrench. All right, next, moving on, just the cutters to remove zip ties, a magnet in case you drop a bolt like I did on the last seat I did. This pliers, I'm not exactly sure what you would call this, but the diameter at the end of that is absolutely perfect for grabbing onto the tubing. So as it grips the tubing, we'll be able to leverage that fitting off the end. And I think this is probably the most important part of the install. It was where I was kind of perplexed until I figured this out. So you'll see when we get to that point, but once that you get that nice and snug on the tubing, you can then put a washer around it. And then that will allow you to take this panel rivet tool, and you can actually place that against the washer, and then working against the fitting at the end of the tubing, you're able to actually spread that apart and use that force to push it off. Now, I'm not sure if there's any other ways of getting leverage on that. If there's a better tool for that, I'd love to know, but this did work for us. And then when it comes time to cut the tubing, you can use this standard hose cutting tool. Worked well for us. Any sort of razor blade or something that cuts it evenly would work as well. We'll be cutting a couple of zip ties, not this many, but it's always nice to have a few around. The hammer, as well as the quarter drive extension, will come in handy to straighten out the barbs from the fitting at the end of the hose. Once we get those off, we'll want to be able to get them back on again. And it worked out well as far as the diameter goes to use that extension. And we will be resetting the barbs, but just as a extra level, we're going to also use some heat shrink tubing to keep them nice and snug. There's the heat gun to tighten those up. The drill comes in handy to spin the motors, make sure everything's in alignment. And then we have the, you may not all have this. It's not absolutely necessary, but it's definitely helpful. I have a pigtail from an E46, which is the same plug as an E39, and I just use that to power the seat mechanism. So using the standard switches on the side of the seat, and that being plugged into our battery pack, I'm able to operate all the functions right here on the bench. Comes in nice and handy. So that's about it. You'll see all of this stuff in action next. All right, there's the passenger seat up on the table. There was just one thing I wanted to note before we got going here. When I took it off, this was actually extended. And I noticed on the driver's seat as well that when this is flipped over, there's a lot of pressure on that. So you want to make sure that that's all the way in before we get started, just to keep that leather nice. The other thing I wanted to show was the pigtail plugged in. Very simple. We have the ground here going to our negative on the battery, and then the positive going to the positive, and that's all you need. Everything else operates right on the side of the seat. All right, so let's get this thing flipped over. And there it is. There's the underside of the seat. Our next step is to remove the lower bracket here. That includes this motor for the tilt, as well as the motor for the front back, as well as the air compressor for the lumbar. So with removing the bottom, there are a couple tricky steps. These springs have plenty of tension on them, so those are a little bit of fun. I mentioned that heavy-duty pick that I had giving us some nice leverage, so I'll show you that in just a second. And beyond that, we also need to remove the seat from here and here, as well as here and here. So this is where the pigtail and the battery come in handy, because we'll be able to get this into position so that we can access everything. Thankfully, this seat did not have the twist issue that the driver's seat had, so I was able to actually do that. And then as we lift this, we're going to relieve some of the tension on that spring. You can see it getting a little tighter. So now the seat is basically fully lifted. Both the back of the seat and the forward portion of the seat. So you could say it's lifted and back and tilted back as well. Hard to explain, but basically the position that gives you the most clearance on all the hardware. So next step is to remove the springs. This is going to be fun, always interesting. So see if I can get a good camera angle on that. There is the edge of that spring hook on that side. We don't want to be on that side because we want to be able to catch the spring as it comes off. So we are going to go on the opposite side of that hook, as such. And then leverage this back to release. Here we go. See, lots of fun. And the same with the other side. You can actually see this one. See how that is able to leverage against here and catch the spring as it pops off. Always fun. So we'll get these out of there so we don't lose them. The other seat, one actually fell down and almost didn't come out. I'm not sure how it got hooked on something inside the seat, but it did. And yeah, gummy bear snack wrappers. Okay, next step will be to remove these bolts towards the front of the seat base. And then that'll allow us to tilt the whole mechanism up to access the wiring. Here's the first T30. We're going to use this extended drive for this one. Not a lot of torque on that, but still enough to make it a little challenging one-handed. And on this side, we have lots of clearance, so I'm just going to use the standard socket. Yeah. So now that rotates freely. And we just have some cabling and motors to disconnect. As we get started, it's good to have something to prop this up with. So it doesn't take much, but just something in the way there to keep it from slamming down on you as you're working. Once we get everything unplugged, the whole base will come off and that'll won't be an issue anymore. So we'll get that plug out of the way. For the fore-aft adjustment, the air compressor comes apart with this little guy here. Go from the underside, push it out. We'll release it. Now this is pretty straightforward. Excuse my camera work. Plug for it is on the side of this housing and can just pop right out the bottom like so. And you'll see this small end here separates from this larger portion here. That plug sucked, so I had to put it down. Yep. Get that thing unplugged and then just set it to the side. That air hose stays connected. That's now disconnected from the upper portion. All right, now to remove this yellow plug from the bracket just requires a little bit of force. You should be able to just push it out of there. Of course, as I'm filming with one hand, it's tough to do, but looks like one side at a time popped it out. Gonna snake the cable out, and there it is. Pretty straightforward to get that out. There's a cable connected underneath here. Let's see if I can get an angle on that. Another motor underneath. So we're just going to, I don't know if you can see that or not, but we're just going to release that. And now that whole harness is separated. Now there's still the two bolts, but also we need to get that seatbelt tensioner disconnected. So to get at the tensioner mechanism, we have to remove this plastic cover. All right, so this has a zip tie around the end to hold it on. So we're going to snip that off. If I can get to it. Easy. And then the back side should come off just with that easy clip there. And the wiring through there. And out. Remember to put that back in, or else you'll be left with a fixed seat without that cap on. So I get to revisit that driver's seat here in a little bit. So this plug is easy. Separate it. Again, just that small end piece from this center piece, like so. And then this little guy is kind of a fun plug. So I haven't seen one like him in a while, but if you've done your tensioner, you would probably know this already. You have to separate this clip. Well, this one doesn't want to go. So grab a pick. We'll get in there with that. And just pop that down on each side. Okay. And it should come off pretty easily, just like that. So now that mechanism is detached from the base as well. Okay, so now we just need to get rid of that Torx and that Torx. These are pretty easily accessible, so I'm just going to use a standard socket on this. Sorry, standard ratchet. Break the torque on that. So we got that side out, and this side is out, but it doesn't want to come all the way. So I'll use our handy dandy pick and just pop him the rest of the way out. Just like that. And then push it back in with my thumb so I can do it again. Oh, look at that. Where's that magnet? Because I knew I would do something like that. There it is. Wouldn't be a job without getting the magnet out. All right, now, maybe wide angle this thing. This comes right off. Wood block falls. This thing's in your hand. Put it somewhere where you won't step on it. Pretty sweet. All right, here's what we're left with. A huge plug and a little air compressor in the way. So we're just going to kind of tuck these somewhere, maybe like that. We'll kind of hold it. Let's do this. You can go right in there. Okay. And this plug needs to go somewhere. Where do you want to tuck it? Right in here. Easy. All right. Now we have access to our drive motors. There's the cable there, cable there, cable there, cable there. So we're going to get a couple things out of the way. Unplug the motors first. And get that harness out of there. Now what we're going to need to do is these 8mm bolts. So earlier I was talking about using this ratchet, which is great when you have a lot of room to work, like this. Easier with both hands, once again, and easier when you have one that doesn't suck like this Craftsman, but it does the job. Okay, now where it's not so much fun is where you don't have any sweep, like back here. Can't even get it on there, or around this bracket. There's not a lot of access either, especially that one back here, because between that tube and that post there's very little clearance. For that bolt I'm going to use the universal and the extension. This next one, it will not work in there because of the brace that's right next to it there. I don't know if you can see that very well on the video. Looks kind of like a ladder going up and down in the middle. This blocks the ratchet from getting to it. But that one we'll have easy access to. That one we won't. So, here we go. Again, nearly impossible with just one hand, so I'm going to put the phone down while I do the work. So remember how I was talking about how awful it was to remove some of these bolts, like that one and that one and that one back there? I guess we don't have to. So if you remove just this bolt and that bolt and that bolt and that bolt, you can then actually rotate the motors up enough that the tubing, let's see if I can get this, there's a shoulder on the tubing that's held in by that bracket. And if you rotate it as we did, then you can get it past that. As you can see, that cable is way too short. That is definitely our problem. That should stick out about 1/2 an inch, 3/4 of an inch, and there's nothing there. Alright, same with this one. I already rotated that out. See how that shoulder is kept in? We'll rotate it out, and it's going to be loose. So we'll pull that out. This one is still working, so there should be more cable in there. Oh yeah. That's about what it's supposed to look like. So actually may not even need to do a repair on that one. Interesting, okay. And then on this side, I actually took both of those bolts out before I figured out our trick. Let's see what we have for the axle on this side. Not bad. It's a little shorter than it should be. And this one, no, it's gonna be tight, okay. I think I'll get our handy tool. Go around that and pull it right out. Perfect. Smarter, not harder, right? Okay. And that one's kind of short too. All right, so I'm going to string these up past this frame so we have better access to them. They're pretty flexible, so it's fine to do this. But it's harder to do one-handed. I'm saying that a lot. Okay, there's those guys. Let's get the gunk off of there. Okay, so we have our 4 cable ends. It's kind of nice. We get to see the contrast between them. So on the top there, that is a fully shrunken cable. I should say fully expanded shroud on the cable. It lengthens over time, apparently, which causes the sheathed cable inside to be eventually too short. Oh, this one actually, okay, so that came out a little bit when we pull it out. So that one's pretty short too. When it first came out, it looked about like that, which is how they should look. Same with these two. It looks like they're both, they were still working, but they were probably right on the edge of their service life. So we're going to redo all of these. So I am going to grip this cable very tightly with these pliers. Is it an ignition plier? I don't know, whatever they are. Grip that nice and tightly. We're going to put this washer on there to leverage against. Now, we're going to take the trim tool and put it right in there, right against there, like that. And then that's going to allow us to leverage away and eventually, see how that's sliding off? This is going to fly up and probably break one of my lights. There he goes. There. Now we have that nice tubing end. Pull out the cable. Now we're going to be ready to cut that. Okay, so now we have this end, and we're going to have to shorten this cable so that we can put this back onto it. So what I found during the other repair is if you take the end of the cable, you want to push it all the way in. Make sure it's seated into the motor. You can actually turn that. If you're turning this, you can see how that's actually spinning that gear slowly but surely. Okay, so we know that it's seated fully. Now, if you see the diameter at the end of the cable there, and then if we just tilt it on its side, see that space from the end is going to be equivalent to the diameter of the fitting. Just like that. And then where we're going to cut it is going to be at the same place it was before we cut, which in this fitting you can see is just inside of that ridge. So again, the diameter of the fitting to there, and just inside of that ridge, it's going to be See if I can get something a little pointier. Right about there. So not much. Like I said, this one was functional, but barely. So we don't need to trim off as much as we otherwise normally would. So we're going to take this out completely. And we're going to get our cutter and position it right where we want it to be. And that is very simply cut right off and into the seat. Oh well, gravity should hopefully take care of that one. So now that that's cut, we can put the shaft back in and spin it and turn it until it's fully seated. There it goes. And as you can see now, when we get that and tilt it over, or a little past it, that'll be fine. That'll give us just enough to get into that motor. Sorry. There, now that we've trimmed it, you can see that we are right about there on the diameter, and then when you lean it over, it's right on that ridge. So you want that square shaft to be pretty much all the way, not quite all the way out of the fitting. Next thing we have to do is take care of the barbed ends inside of here. First, we're going to need to take that cloth bushing out. And to do that, you can just use a pick, either this large one or the smaller one. Whichever one works, you just kind of got to get in there and work it out of there. And that's what the bushing looks like once you get it out. It's like a cloth of some sort. All right, there we have the barbs. We're going to take the flats of this extension are going to go where the barbs go, and that's going to help us to push the barbs back into their pre-crimped position using the curve on the edge of the extension. So that's going to need a little help from the hammer. So I'll tap that in. Okay, I've tapped it all the way in, and as you can see, the barbs are now not totally flush, but they're kind of back where they're supposed to be. That'll be enough to get it back onto the tubing again. So the fun part now is getting the fitting off the end, which requires a trip over to the vise. So if you're ever wondering what this is for from your toolkit, this is exactly it. We're going to just line that up on top of there, give it a couple tappies, and that extension will come back to us. There, now you can see that those barbs are nice and flush. It'll be easy to push this back onto the tubing, just like that. See, pretty much slides right on, no problem. So what we're going to do is get it so the edge of that tubing is just inside of that ridge, if that's visible or not. Get all this flubber out of there. It's about right where we want it. So now we have to recrimp these. So I found that this works pretty well. Shouldn't say pretty well. It works well enough for the purpose of what we're doing. So you can get the corner of it in on each side where the crimp naturally was, and then apply pressure to it. Try to get those crimps to reseat. I'll have to put the phone down for this part. There, that actually worked really well this time. So those are nicely crimped back in place, and this isn't going anywhere. But nevertheless, I'm going to grab our heat shrink And I'm going to put this on there, and we're going to shrink it up so that it definitely doesn't go anywhere. Now I got lucky, and I found out that this tubing will actually fit over the edge of these. But if you don't have tubing that fits over the edge, you may want to put it onto the hose first. Once again, I need 2 hands. Oh, will it go? Will it go? Will it go? No, 2 hands. All right, now we have the heat shrink slipped on into it in place. We're gonna turn on our heat gun here and just shrink it up. So satisfying. We're not too close to the leather here, so I'm able to do this, but definitely something to be careful of is what is behind the heat gun. You don't want to cook anything that's not supposed to be cooked. All right, so that completes the repair to this one. We'll pop the bushing back into place, and that goes right in there. Maybe help it in a little bit with this guy. There. Now that is a finished repair. Now that is basically ready to go back in the motor, but we are also going to make sure that everything in the mechanism is lined up properly before we do that. Now the way I did it on the other one, you can count these teeth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see that reference point for me is that bottom tooth is just in line with the frame. So this one has to be adjusted just a smidge back into place, but you can choose your own reference point. The idea is that you get it dead even from side to side, because you don't want to go through this repair and end up with a permanently twisted seat either. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 cables to match that beautiful cable, and then we'll get this all buttoned up. Okay, we've got all 4 cables repaired. There's those 2. And those 2. The bushings are back in all 4. Focus, focus. There they are. Ready to go back together. So now we're going to use our drill to rotate these. And then we're going to count teeth and surfaces and these guys too, to make sure that everything is lined up dead even side to side. So where'd that drill go? So we've hooked up the drill to this shaft. It's going to adjust the rear lift. So we're going to count out the teeth to the 6th tooth is visible right there, and just past it. I like being right on that edge. Right there. It's a good reference point. Side to side. You'll have to visualize that on your own. So now that we did that cable, we're going to go to the other cable on the other side and do the exact same measurement. All right, now we know that those teeth are lined up in the exact same way that those teeth are lined up. And now we can reinsert these cables into their respective motors. And then we'll be able to bolt it all back together. So I'll start with this side. That goes right in there as such. Hopefully lines up. There's a good way to rotate that shaft inside of there while you're putting it in, so sometimes you have to just give it a quick flick one way or the other and hope that it lines up where you want it to. And find the seat. There it goes. Perfect. So that side's in. Now we'll do the same thing on this side. Let's swing it back under that piece as it was earlier. Nope. Perfect. I just have to find that right angle on it, and then that rotates back down into place, locking those in. So we're going to replace the bolts that goes in there and there. These little guys. Snug. Now we do the same for this side. There. And we'll check that and make sure this cable's nice and snug, which it is. And that motor's fixed. So we'll put these cables back into the bottom motor, just like we did on the top one, and then we'll plug it back in. Okay, there it is. You can see all the heat shrunken ends. It's all bolted back into place on each side. Everything is nice and tight. We're going to go ahead and start putting all of our plugs back into place. And then we'll get the seat bottom frame and put that on there. Okay, so I just placed this somewhat into position. So to start with, we have to get these Torx bolts back into position. Let's start with this one because it's easiest to get to. So now that those bolts are in position and torqued, we're going to put the cap back onto the seatbelt tensioner. So to do that, first we're going to plug it back in. So that piece will go in the top. And once it clicks, then you push down on the top, snug it into place. And then this is just a simple push together plug. Now if you remember, this had some unique positioning on it. The cable here snaked through it. So there, that's clipped into place. Now this plug goes back into this clip. Should be, there it goes. Okay, and then you just sneak this on. Like so. So that is back into place. We're going to need to put a zip tie here. Simple stuff. Of course, tighten that and trim it. Then we'll move on to the other plugs. Okay, so now we have the seat bottom still pretty much detached electronically. We're going to fix that now. So to start with, put this plug down into place. which is going to sneak up between that rail and into those grooves that we had originally popped it out of. Just like that. And that is snapped into place. Then we have to snake this cord. Goes through this fitting right here. Hard to see, but there's a slot that this cord fits through. And you'll see it right there as it's in its correct position. Now, this motor needs to be plugged in. That's this wire here. Up here. Okay. And then we of course have the motors we repaired. Have their color-coded plugs. Okay. And then the fore aft motor plugs in there. And now we need to get the air compressor back into place. This thing's kind of fun because it has this fun little piece of insulation around it. Keep things nice and quiet, I imagine. Vibration free. So I don't know if you can see me, but you can also see that carpet padding, for lack of a better term, fits in there. And then this just sneaks right in on top of it and snaps in there like that. Hopefully you guys saw that. Pretty straightforward. And then we have the plug for that as well, is the last one. Now we have everything plugged in, tucked away as it should be. We'll get these other two bolts in over here, there, and there. Okay, everything is back together. You may say, what about the springs? Yes, the springs, the fun part. These high tension guys. So, there's the one hook there, and there's the other hook. Right there. So, we need to get that guy to that guy. And you can't do this by hand. I mean, you can do it by hand, but you need something like this. So, I'm going to grab this here. And actually, I'm going to flip this to the other side because you want to have a nice angle on the spring. If you don't have a good angle on the spring, it risks flying out of there, not going where you want it. So if I can grab it from this side like this, I can pull it like this. I can pull it down and hook it on that hook without it flying off. Let's see if I can get this. There it goes. Yeah. Lots of tension. This one will be the same thing. I'm going to get that hook in there the way we want to, so it has a nice angle on it. Okay, here we go. On it is. There you have it. That's the seat repair. So I'm gonna put the pigtail in and hook it up to my power so that I can wind it back down. I want the seat base as flush to the bottom as possible. That just makes the seat smaller to get it into the vehicle. That's all it is. Have fun.